The views and opinions expressed here are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the opinions, beliefs, or viewpoints of DerryCAM, the town of Derry, any employee or affiliate. This program is the sole responsibility of the producer.
Hi, I'm Anthony Henry. Welcome back to America's Ass, Episode 6. We made it. Just like last time, I'm Anthony Henry, and with me today is special guest Erica Layon. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me here, Anthony. I really appreciate everything that you do here in the community and having me on this show.
Thank you.
My name is Erica Layon. I'm one of the 10 state representatives for Derry. This is my second term, and I serve as vice chairman on the Health, Human Services, and Elderly Affairs Committee. I've also been on the Education Committee, and I have the fun job of helping review all the administrative rules before they go into enforcement. So it's a lot, but it's a lot of fun being able to stand up in Concord and represent the people of Derry and the people of New Hampshire.
Okay, going right to the first topic. It's a big topic in the presidential election news. Ron DeSantis is expected to announce his campaign tonight, Wednesday, May 24th. He's going to do a video supposedly with Elon Musk, who has endorsed him. So that'll be really interesting. It's going to be Trump's main opponent in the primary. So what are your thoughts?
I'm really excited to see him announce. I've actually endorsed Governor DeSantis because I think that he's going to be the best path forward for us. As I watched us come out of COVID and look at different governors and look at their responses, he did a really good job standing up to some of the administration's choices that came down during COVID. I think that he's a strong leader, especially with his background being the attached lawyer to the Navy SEALs. He knows what goes on overseas, and I think he's a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, one of the things I like about him is that he has like all of Trump's views, but like without all of the, I guess, pomp and attitude and rudeness that Trump can sometimes have. And that's good sometimes with Trump, because people tend to not listen to other people when they're all nice and stuff. And with Trump, they listen to him when he got mad all the time. But it also ended up making him look like an idiot sometimes. And I think that won't happen as much with DeSantis. Less likely to have scandal.
I think he's a lot more measured, and I think that he goes with his convictions and what he believes are the true principles. So by doing that, it's a lot easier to focus on the target and make sure that you're doing what people are interested in, and just make sure that you're set and following the policy that helps people. You know, he's really stood up to some of the backlash, and he stood strong. They've talked about Disney, and they're trying to blame him for the lack of those 2,000 jobs, but really it's because Disney stock is in the tank and they need to save money. So it's more Disney's choices and not the fact that they don't get special treatment anymore.
Yeah, Disney had their whole government basically. They had a fire department, they had a police department, they had like special tax exemptions, and it really wasn't fair. People didn't realize that for a long time.
No, and I'm trying to look into it, but I think that Universal Studios and Legoland had to pay some of what Disneyland wasn't paying, so that didn't really help the competition there.
Yeah. What do you think of Elon endorsing DeSantis?
I think it's fantastic. I think Elon Musk is a brilliant man. He does a lot of things, and he does them really well. And I think the fact that Elon Musk is behind DeSantis is really good.
Yeah, he's real. Elon's really his own man. He's not really for either side. Mm-hmm. So I think him endorsing DeSantis is going to be really important.
I think Elon rises above a lot of the culture war issues, just trying to say that I'm respecting you as an individual. This group shouldn't trample them, and the other group shouldn't come over and trample either. So I think that he's very much a classic liberal in the fact that you live in order to not hurt other people. And then you make money by doing good and bringing good things to people. So I think Musk's endorsement's great.
Yeah, and another thing, we kind of talked about this when Tucker Carlson announced he'd be doing his show on Twitter. DeSantis is doing his announcement on Twitter as well. So I think Twitter is going to end up becoming a much bigger part of media in general soon. I think a couple episodes back we had Brian Shirasholo on. He kind of had the idea that Twitter could kind of morph into something else other than what it is now. And I think it's kind of moving toward that way, if you think about it.
Well, the main reason I'm on Twitter is so I can follow what's happening in the state. Kevin Landrigan from the Union Leader tweets about what's happening in Concord all the time. And right now I don't post on Twitter, I just watch on Twitter, but it's become a really, really useful source.
Yeah, and I think more and more people are getting their news off of social media rather than a news channel or something like that.
I agree, and there's the dangers from that as well, but we know that in the media, well, there's bias as well. So it's a matter of, when my mom was a teacher, she taught fact or opinion. So you need to be able to figure out the difference between fact and opinion, and that's what we as news consumers need to do as well, whether it's mainstream media or on Twitter or social media.
Yeah, totally agree. Anyway, moving on to the next topic. This is a topic I really don't know too much about, but it's been in the news a lot, and it's going to have a big impact on our government for the next while or so. Kevin McCarthy has announced that he wants to finish up the debt ceiling talks today. It's been a very contentious issue with Congress and the president. They're not agreeing at all about it. So you have a financial background, so you probably know a lot more about it than I do. So
I know some about it. I've been focusing a lot on what we're doing in Concord, but that's impacted by Washington, D.C. as well. We have some Medicaid expansion that I can talk about later when I'm talking about the state, but right now the House Republicans and Congress have put together a package where they'd increase the debt ceiling some, and they're looking to add work requirements back to Medicaid expansion. So that's not the program where if you're disabled or you're old and don't have as much money to go into a nursing home, or even if you have kids. But that expansion program is you don't have kids, you make up to 138% of the federal poverty level, and you could work. There used to be work requirements, and it's good because you feel better when you're out there interacting with people. We know what being locked at home feels like with COVID, and you just feel better when you're out there with people. So we in New Hampshire are trying to get that work requirement back as well, and that's one of the big things they're pushing for in the debt ceiling negotiation. I like their strategy. They've given their line, they've given their information, they're willing to talk. And I really hope that President Biden comes to the table and speaks with them as well, because these are negotiations. You have the House, the Senate, and then making sure that the president's not going to veto it. And everybody needs to be at the table.
yeah, and I think this is just one of the first of many disagreements that are going to be between Joe Biden and Kevin McCarthy. I think that's going to be like sort of the next Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich, maybe, or Trump and Pelosi. But it's going to be real interesting to see how Biden handles it, because I know McCarthy wants to talk, but Biden doesn't really want to.
And I think we're seeing some of the strength that came from the whole negotiation over Speaker. The fact that there was a small group who was willing to hold out over this. While that bothered a lot of people and was frustrating when people watched it, people know that the Republicans, when they pulled together, mean business on this agreement for the debt ceiling. And so I think that this is going to help their position and just show that they're showing up to the table. They're giving solutions. And now it's a matter of the president and everybody else working with them.
Yeah, totally agree. Anyway, Montana has banned TikTok. TikTok's been a big discussion on the show past few episodes. Montana is the first state to do it, first of many probably. The governor, Greg Gianforte, I think that's how you say it, has banned it. He signed the legislation a couple days ago, I think. So what are your thoughts?
I actually don't like it. I think that you should have the right to go to whatever site that's not harming people that you want to. I don't like TikTok. I think it's spying on us. I think it's a bad idea to participate in it. But the government coming in and saying that because you're in this state, you can't go to this platform, I think is the wrong direction. And I don't think it's useful either, because you have VPNs. So if you want to watch German television, you can have a VPN, say you're in Germany. So if you're in Montana and you want to use TikTok, you can do a VPN and say you're in California or New Hampshire or any other place that doesn't limit your content. I mean, it's a delicate balance because there is harm. And there's a lot of self-harm videos that are on TikTok too. So I understand the motivation, but I personally don't think it's the right solution.
Yeah, it's something I've thought about, definitely. I don't like TikTok either. I'm probably one of the few teens that has never downloaded it in my life. I don't plan on downloading it anytime soon. But yeah, banning it is something I struggle with, because on one hand, yeah, it's spying on us. Like, we talked about that at length in episode 1, some in episode, I forget, but Yeah, banning it is something I definitely struggle with. Interesting to see which states are going to try to ban it next. I think Florida probably might try to. I don't know if DeSantis would sign it. Texas might try to. So.
A lot of those states have much shorter legislative seasons than we do. Texas only meets once in the 2 years. Florida, I think, has already finished their legislative season. So they pack everything into a much tighter time period. So we usually get started before the other states and finish up after them. So I'm not sure that we're going to see more bans on TikTok this year, but I expect at the different legislator conferences this summer, that's going to be discussed a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I say anyway a lot, don't I? I don't know why.
It's a good transition.
Yeah.
Yes.
Richard Tripp likes to say anyhow. I noticed that in his speeches. New Hampshire weed legislation. So, some of you, if you follow my, I guess, Snapchat, Instagram, whatever, you know this has been a topic of discussion in Concord. The weed bill got shot down by the Senate. 14 noes, 10 yeses, I believe. The 10 yeses were 9 Democrats and 1 Republican, and the 14 noes were 13 Republicans and 1 Democrat. I think I got that right.
Yes, that's correct. Okay. And the two that crossed parties were Senator Murphy, who represents part of Manchester and Hooksett and a few other areas, and Lou D'Alessandro, who represents Manchester. So those two separated from their party and showed there is some bipartisan agreement in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
So that was a really, really disappointing thing to see coming out of the Senate, especially some of the language that they used in the discussion. I'm actually one of the co-sponsors of House Bill 639, which is the cannabis legislation. This one, I think it was a really good compromise between free market and having that government control, because it had testing, it had a 12.5%, sorry, I'm getting way too much in the details.
Keep going into details.
So
Good.
it had a 12.5% tax, not to the customer, but when you sold it to the end store. So let's say that there was a market here in Derry that was selling them. Whoever's providing either flour or something that's more highly processed to that store would pay 12.5%. They'd pay 12.5% at that point. But then whenever it's sold to the end consumer, there's no tax there. That means the state doesn't have an interest in having higher cannabis prices. It's all based on the wholesale. And one of the reasons why cannabis legalization has failed in places like California is in California you have a 36% state tax. You have, in some places, 8 or 9% sales tax on top. There's a jurisdiction tax where they add. So you're looking at over 50% tax rate on it in California. So, of course, the black market is flourishing because you can make it cheaper, you can sell it for cheaper, and it's just not working as a model if you tax it too much. So that's why we came through with the approach that we had. Yeah.
One concern I have about the weed thing is youth. People are already smoking that in Pinkerton. If you're a student at Pinkerton, you definitely see it or smell it. So what would that bill do to, like, curb the youth use, I guess?
So in order to curb youth use, you actually need to replace the black market with the legal market. If you have people, instead of going to a street dealer, going to a store, it's like buying alcohol at the store. Yes, teenagers do get alcohol, but it's harder than when it was when the age was lower and when it was around more. By having it in those state stores and having the penalty just on people under 21, then that moves the focus and it makes it so that there's less of a market for that sells to youth.
Yeah.
And that's what we tried to do. We tried to bring the balance and make it so that we would make it so that there was no reason to be part of the illegal market in New Hampshire, because people who wanted to be in that business could join the legal market and be part of a regulated, lightly regulated, but regulated market and sell known products to people who wanted to buy them.
Yeah, so what the state's envisioning basically is what we have for the liquor system, right? Where it's state controlled?
So what we had wasn't state controlled. What we had in 639 was not state controlled. We'd have licenses, but there wasn't a cap on licenses. After the Senate shot it down, the governor said that he would support a state model, similar to the liquor stores. So we have an amendment to one of the Senate bills that still exists that brings in a state model. So this one was introduced just earlier this week. And instead of having state liquor stores, they'd give out licenses, but the state would be the one checking the purity, checking the content. And they're trying to strike a balance so that we can get something done. This is a big topic. We had a medical marijuana bill that came back to my committee where they added a commission to study this whole legalization problem. The unfortunate thing there is that it's trying to check, way too many details, but basically it makes it so chronic pain patients might need to get spinal surgery before they can have medical marijuana for back pain. So we were hoping to just do an easy fix, but now the Senate wants to add on more. But we may be able to get something done this actual year, but more likely we'll move to something that'll work next year if we're able to come together.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch. Do you think it's going to become legal this legislative session? Either this year or next year?
I'm not sure. I'm hopeful that it will be, because right now people run the risk of being arrested for it. They run the risk of having their life ruined because of the arrest. And worse, they run the risk of getting drugs off of the street that have fentanyl in them. Usually that's not cut into marijuana, but it can be. And I really would like to see people who want it to be able to get safe product in a safe environment. Right now, we ended up splitting on a party line when we tried to add it to one of our bills, because the Democrats want more regulation, the Republicans want less regulation. And I'm just hopeful that we can find our one compromise point this year and do this.
I'll be watching. So another bill you wanted to talk about was the Medicare or Medicaid?
Medicaid expansion.
Medicaid expansion. So
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Oh, thank you.
Go into as much detail as you want.
Okay, perfect. So we have a couple of different government-paid insurance programs. One's Medicare, which is when you're over 65. Then you have our traditional Medicaid. That's if you're on disability. That's if you're below a certain income with kids. There's a whole bunch of different conditions where we as a society have said, you know what, we need to help you out. You get Medicaid. Expanded Medicaid came around with Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act. Basically, because they made insurance more expensive by putting all these rules on it, they added this extra group of Medicaid. So those are people that don't have kids, that make more money, and that initially there was a work requirement. There was a requirement that if you have a certain amount of money, you need to pay back your free medical care. And so that's been law for 13 years now. We got our first version 9 years ago in New Hampshire, and we are in a 5-year program where it's actually run through managed care organizations. That expires at the end of this year. So there's people that'll tell you that if we don't pass these bills, it's going to go away, but that's false. We have a 2-year extension in the budget, and I've been working with the one where they sent it over to us where it would be permanent. Leave it in there. Leave old expired language that isn't in effect in our statutes and make it go on forever and ever and ever. And that's something that I said absolutely no to. In my committee, we tried to make it for 2 years, but we realized, that doesn't actually make sense. When you're going to do a contract, you want it to be for longer. So we're going to try and accommodate a 5-year contract, just like we tried to do this first time. So we started in January 2019 with Medicaid expansion, and we got about one normal year, because I don't know about you, but once COVID hit, it hasn't been normal.
Nope.
And we still have even more people, because in COVID, you couldn't remove anybody from the program. So we never really got our trial run of Medicaid expansion. So I actually brought on the floor of the House to do a 6-year extension instead of making it permanent. It was really close. Our attendance wasn't great, but I'm confident that we're going to get it done for the people of New Hampshire to have a 6-year extension in the budget for the state of New Hampshire.
Yeah, attendance has been a real issue at the State House this past year.
It has, and it's been so disappointing for me. I actually flew back from California twice for sessions. We actually lost my mother-in-law just before Easter. And I flew back between when she died and when I went back for the funeral. But there's other people who aren't showing up for reasons that are far, far less grave than that. So I'm disappointed, and I hope that people in their districts will elect somebody who will show up.
Yeah, sorry to hear about your mother-in-law.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And some people have been in the hospital for some of their times or seeking treatment. So when somebody has a valid reason, that makes a lot of sense. I'd rather see somebody deal with those issues as opposed to to suffer harm by going to session. But if you're not facing harm, you need to show up and do your job.
Yeah, and there's also situations like Robin Vogt, is that how you say it?
I believe so.
From Portsmouth, who had a super PAC pay for his flight from Florida to New Hampshire because the Dems wanted the upper hand. So
they offered to pay. He wasn't there, so that's good. But nobody should be paying for it. I had jokingly asked about my mileage reimbursement from San Diego, knowing that that's not what the law is. We get paid miles based on where our house is, and that's the appropriate way to do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, dark money. You got to keep it out of New Hampshire.
Yes.
So the other big legislative topic is the state budget. So again, go into as much detail as you want.
Oh, thank you. So the state budget ends up bringing a whole bunch of different pieces together. We do it every 2 years, and sometimes there's different topics that are added because they're so important. We need to make sure that they happen. One of them is actually state of emergency reform. Here in New Hampshire, we did it better than most states during the pandemic, but that doesn't mean that we're not guaranteed to not have a Governor Whitmer or a Governor Newsom in the future. So Governor Sununu did a good job. I'd like to think that if I was in that position, I would have done better, but unless you're in that situation, you don't know how it's going to work. Right now, the governor can declare a state of emergency for 21 days and then continue it on, and the legislature can meet, and the House can say, nope, it's over, and then the Senate needs to agree that, nope, it's over, and then the state of emergency is over. So both of them need to agree in order to stop it. We had language that the governor actually had agreed to in the previous term's budget that said that instead of the legislature needing to act together to end the state of emergency, the legislature needed to work together to extend the state of emergency. So we have language that after 84 days, about 3 months, the legislature, both the House and Senate, would need to meet and say, yes, this is an emergency. Let's continue the state of emergency. And in any valid emergency, they're going to continue that. I mean, you look at it and you look at the way that we were dealing with the changes in laws based on the public health emergency. We would have continued it here in New Hampshire. But you also look at North Carolina, and North Carolina's governor just called a state of emergency because he disagreed with the legislation that was passed. That's what we face if we don't put in safety valves and we don't make it so the legislature needs to continue the state of emergency. So that's one of the big areas that we need in order to make sure we have good bipartisan support of the budget. And we also need a 6-year sunset on the Medicaid expansion. Now, there's some talk now of 7 years, that you'd have that 5-year contract and a chance to do an extra year. I was in the financial markets. Getting an extra year as an option isn't free. If you think about it, let's say you get a subscription somewhere and you can extend it if you want to. It's only when it benefits you. So it's going to cost a little bit more to have that option in the future. So it's interesting. I think that because it's so close, we're working really, really hard to make sure that nobody's going to love the whole budget, but to have enough where people are satisfied that what they believe is most vital for the state is being met, and that we're doing what we need to in order to keep the state moving forward. I'm just hoping we keep enough in the rainy day fund, because I'm an economist. I have a degree in economics from MIT. I worked on Wall Street for almost 2 decades, and I can see a good chance of a recession. So we just need to spend your money like we know that there might be some trouble around the corner.
Yeah, and we've been in trouble economically for a while, like inflation. Everyone sees it. So.
Well, everyone sees it, but that also comes in on the income line for the state.
Yeah.
So some people don't recognize, woohoo, we're collecting more taxes, but that's because of inflation. So we just need to be careful not to spend all of those taxes now and put them aside for when, we wake up and realize, oh, that bubble was tough.
Yeah. So we have a couple more minutes left. So what's another big bill happening right now?
Actually, there was one that's a really good example of how we work together and people don't really see it. So we had this public health emergency, and so you could have telehealth. So call to your doctor or be on a video with your doctor. And they allowed you to prescribe controlled substances, which are some of your anxiety medicines or pain medicines. And that went away on May 11th. So the In the House, the Democrats and Republicans worked together to get good language, and the Senate worked together to get good language. And we were trying to figure out how to have even more protections for people for consent on their medical record, and how to make sure that parents were having the right consent for their child's treatment. We ended up deciding, pulling back from some of that language and just agreeing that we were just going to get the basic bill passed. We got it there. We got it passed out the day that it needed to, got it right to the governor's desk. And with that, I was speaking with Majority Leader Jason Osborne, with Minority Leader Matt Wilhelm. I was speaking with the Senate, and we all worked together to do what needed to be done. But that's never going to make the papers, because the papers only like to talk about when we disagree. But we do a lot that we agree about in Concord, which is nice. I think 60-something% of our bills are on the consent calendar, because that means everybody agrees with what the committee recommends.
Yeah, when I'm in Concord, I see, during lunchtime, I see Dems eating lunch with Republicans. People don't realize how much they actually get along. Most of them are buddy-buddy all the time, except on the House floor sometimes when they're debating, but.
That's because we are friends and we respect each other, but we still have our policy disagreements.
Yeah.
So we will fight respectfully for our policies on the floor, but that doesn't change the fact that we respect and like our colleagues, and that's why we're able to work together when there's something that isn't diametrically opposed.
Yeah, just another thing that's distorted by the media. So anyway, we're almost out of time, so feel free to give a closing statement.
Okay. Thank you so much, Anthony. I really, really appreciate the chance to come on this show and actually talk on a show here in Derry. I'd been sitting in on some shows with one of the reps in Litchfield. It's such an honor to be able to be up in Concord and stand up for people's rights. It's always a balance to make sure that, just balance your competing rights and what other people are doing. But by being in Concord, seeing what the departments do, what the administration does, we were helping the disability community today. They haven't been heard enough by the Department of Health and Human Services, and we came to an agreement with the department and with the Disability Rights Center, and now everybody feels much more assured that they're going to be working together going forward. And it's so nice to be able to help solve problems for people. So with everybody here in Derry, we're going to be coming up on the summer. If you want to speak to me about any challenges that you're having, some of them, they can be addressed just by helping us connect you with the commissioner or anybody else. And maybe it might need legislation. So reach out to myself or any of the other representatives.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. Really, really appreciate having you. All right, we're done. I'm Anthony Henry. This has been America's Ass. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.